There's that old saying about stories.
Right, that there are always three versions of them.
Exactly. Yours, mine, and then, well, the truth. And when you're dealing with a family like the Ives media empire, a family that literally built its fortune on controlling what you see, that truth gets almost impossible to nail down.
That's absolutely right. And that brings us to Margaret Grace Ives, the woman they called the tabloid princess, who spent, decades just fleeing the very spotlight she was born into.
So this deep dive is about that surprising moment when Margaret, a total recluse on Little Crescent Island, decides she wants to tell what she called the whole awful truth. We're going to follow the investigative journey as Alice Scott. She's this young, really enthusiastic writer, and she's competing for this job against a literary giant.
The cynical, Pulitzer-winning Hayden Anderson. And what's so fascinating here is this isn't a simple biography project. It's really a multi-generational conspiracy. The competition itself was rigged from the start.
Right.
Margaret, by setting this whole thing up, is forcing these two people to trace the generational trauma that led her to silence in the first place. She wants the truth out, but she's putting them through a test,
A test of character to see who's worthy of it.
Exactly. And to understand it, we have to go back, way back, 150 years to the moment the Ives family's fatal flaw was first established.
Okay, let's start there, at the foundation. The whole Ives media empire it exists because of a betrayal, right? The original sin.
Committed by Margaret's great-grandfather, Lawrence Richard Ives. And Lawrence, he wasn't a media titan to begin with. He was a dirt-poor, eighth-born son out prospecting in the West.
And he had a partner, Thomas Doherty.
He did. And they struck silver, a lot of silver, 42 tons of ore to be exact.
But Lawrence gets greedy.
He lies to Thomas, says the land is worthless, waits for him to leave, and then buys the whole mine for pennies on the dollar. Weeks later, he's a millionaire. The family fortune starts with a lie.
And this is so crucial. The very first thing he buys with that money isn't a mansion or a yacht.
No, it's a publication. The San Francisco Daily Dispatch. This wasn't just a smart business move. This was the founding DNA of the Ives family. The first thing they bought was control.
Control over the narrative.
To make sure their empire was built on top of that original concealed sin.
That need for control, though, it seemed to consume him. The notes say he was haunted, that he'd argue with a phantom Thomas until he died.
Constantly apologizing. It shows the real cost of that wealth was moral, not financial.
Absolutely. And during those final ratings, he kept muttering one name over and over, Nicolette.
Okay, so who is Nicolette?
Nicolette was his younger sister, and she'd married a Doherty, probably a relative of Thomas's, and she completely rejected Lawrence after the truth came out.
So because of her moral stand, the name took on this bigger meaning in the family.
Yes. Nicolette became this shorthand. It meant the person you'd sacrifice anything for, or the person who must be protected at all costs. It's less a name and more of a generational burden. A burden of loyalty. Wow. And you can see that burden applied almost immediately to the next generation, right? With Margaret's grandfather, Gerald Ives.
Gerald was a politician, a studio executive, a man just obsessed with appearances, and his betrayal wasn't about money, it was relational. He had an affair with an actress, Nina Gill.
And it resulted in a secret daughter.
A daughter named Ruth, born overseas around 1930. And to protect his career, to protect the family image, he applied that Nicolette principle.
He sacrificed his own child.
Precisely. To avoid the scandal, Ruth was raised by Gerald's sister Gigi as her adopted daughter. The truth was just buried. And the child paid the price. It's the rhythm of the Ives family. Build an empire on secrets, then pay with your relationships.
The layers of concealment are just incredible. Okay, so let's move forward to Margaret's parents. Freddie Ives, the, quote, derelict playboy, and Doris Bernhardt, Bernie, the shrewd director, they seem like such a mismatch.
They really were, at least to the public. Their marriage was a surprise. It came out of this genuine friendship, not some big, passionate fireworks display. He famously asked her to marry him because she was his favorite person.
But even that, a quiet, genuine love, it couldn't escape the media's hunger, could it?
Not at all. Their divorce was front-page news. The playboy and the shrew part ways, that was the headline. And Margaret watched this whole circus unfold.
So she learns early on that you can't really defeat the media narrative.
So she decides to embrace it. She becomes the tabloid princess, turning her life into this ultimate public spectacle.
But wait, that seems like such a contradiction. She hated the media, but then she marries a rock star, Cosmo Sinclair, and creates the most iconic spectacle of all running up the courthouse steps to elope.
That duality is the key to Margaret.
Cool.
She hated the exposure, but she understood that if you're going to be a spectacle, you might as well write the script yourself.
And Cosmo Sinclair, the great American storyteller, was a pretty good co-star.
He was magnetic. Margaret apparently hated him at first, blamed him for something that happened to her younger sister Laura, but he charmed her. And for a little while, she was trying to prove she could win the celebrity game on her own terms.
And here's where it all starts to get really dark, because the cost of that fame is about to be paid in full by Margaret's generation. We're moving into the trauma of the 1980s.
Yeah, the fame machine was it was too much for Laura, Margaret's younger sister. She really struggled with the constant scrutiny, and then their grandfather's death hit her hard. It left her very vulnerable.
And vulnerability in that family is a dangerous thing.
She gets drawn into this destructive cult led by a man named Dr. David Ryan Atwood. And this all culminates in the People's Moment plot investigation and a trial. And the headlines were just monstrous.
Margaret saw the press literally destroying her sister's spirit.
And then, in this just impossibly cruel twist of fate, while that's all over the news, her husband, Cosmo Sinclair, dies in a tragic accident.
Her response to that was just pure defiance, pure vengeance against the media.
It really was. She wore her wedding dress to his burial. It was one last, unforgettable spectacle, a silent accusation aimed right at the press for taking everything from her.
It was this act of just raw grief, but also, like you said before, a desperate attempt to regain control.
And after that, she was done. She retreated completely, shut herself away for 2 whole years in Gerald's wing of the house, just consumed by guilt over what happened to Laura. The House of Secrets became her prison.
And she shut everyone out.
Yeah.
Except for one person, right? Dr. Cecil Willoughby.
Cecil, yeah. The doctor who testified at the Atwood trial about Laura's mental state. He visited her every week. He was her last connection to her sister, who had just vanished from public life after the trial.
That relationship, however quiet it was, becomes so central to the story Margaret eventually wants to tell.
It's everything.
So let's fast forward. Years later, Margaret's on this island, selling mosaics, seemingly at peace, and our biographer, Alice Scott, finally gets access. This is where she starts to make these critical discoveries.
Right. Alice notices that the mosaics Margaret makes aren't just random art. They're unicursal labyrinths.
Paths with only one way in and one way out.
Exactly. It reflects how the Ives family saw their own lives as this cursed, fixed path they couldn't escape.
And then comes the big human revelation.
The big one. Alice pieces it together. Jody, this brusque, short-tempered assistant who handles Margaret's sales,
is Laura, her sister, hiding in plain sight the whole time.
The layers of protection are just profound. Margaret gave up her public life, so Laura, who was still so scarred from the cult, could live anonymously. This is the Nicolette principle in its final, most devoted form.
Okay, now we get to the synthesis point. The moment all 3 generations of secrets just collide.
This is it. Alice realizes why the competition was set up.
She connects the name Nicolette
To Hayden Anderson's mother, Ruth Nicolette Ives Allen.
the secret baby, Gerald's daughter, who is raised as his niece.
Which means the Pulitzer-winning Hayden Anderson is Margaret's relative. He's the son of her hidden sister, or cousin, depending on how you look at it. He's family.
So the whole audition was a lie.
A complete lie. It turns out Hayden had actually refused Margaret's offer to write the book before.
Why?
Because she wouldn't talk about Dr. Cecil Willoughby.
Wow. So who got Alice involved?
It was Jody Laura. She anonymously emailed Alice the tip about Margaret and the competition. It was this desperate, convoluted plan not to find a writer, but to manipulate the situation, to force Hayden to finally engage with them.
So why the manipulation? What was the actual goal?
Margaret confirms it. Jody believed she was fulfilling a promise their deceased aunt, Ruth Hayden's mother, had made to tell him the truth about his heritage.
So Margaret was testing Hayden's character this whole time before dropping this life-altering bomb on him.
Yes, that he's part of the very family he was supposed to be writing about. It wasn't about finding the best writer. It was about luring lost family back into the fold and finally dismantling 3 generations of lies.
And this all hinges on Alice's final choice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
She knows the secret, but she's been sworn to confidence.
She's standing right at the center of the Ives family's generational crisis, and she makes the right call. She refuses to break Margaret's confidence. She recognizes that trust is more important than winning.
But she doesn't just walk away.
No, she writes this powerful letter to Margaret, insisting that Hayden deserves to know the truth, that this cycle of concealment has to end with her.
And that honesty, That refusal to participate in the secrecy is what finally breaks through.
It's the truth she was testing them for all along, and the payoff is, it's extraordinary. Hayden and Alice reconcile. They realize the book they were meant to write wasn't some historical account of a media dynasty,
It was a love story.
but sacrifice and redemption. They end up co-authoring the biography.
And they moved to Atlanta, and they named their daughter Laura Grace Anderson Scott, symbolically bringing Margaret's family back into the light.
And the book they write, it focuses on that central question that defined the whole Ives family. For whom would you unmake the world, and how would you build a new one?
It synthesizes everything, doesn't it? Lawrence's betrayal, Gerald's sacrifice, Margaret's sacrifice for Laura.
And the conclusion is that the only way to build that new world is through radical honesty. The truth wasn't in some old newspaper clipping. It was built on empathy between the writers and their subject.
Which is such a beautiful resolution for a dynasty that was built on lies.
And Margaret, she finally finds peace. She realizes that her heartbreak, the broken bits of her past, they can be repurposed, just like the glass in her mosaics.
I think that's the perfect place to land. The Ives family thought they were walking that cursed path, that labyrinth, with only one way out.
But what Alice and Hayden realized is that the path itself was constructed by choices, and it could be rearranged.
It leads to that final, beautiful observation from Alice's notes, that maybe every bit of heartbreak, every broken piece of glass can be rearranged and used for something beautiful.
The Ives family spent 150 years burying their history to protect themselves. But the only way forward was to stop hiding and start rebuilding, with all the broken pieces laid bare.
That's a powerful thought to leave you with. We all have those shattered bits of history, those difficult truths we try to conceal. This deep dive into the Ives family legacy, it really raises a question for all of us. What parts of your own personal history are you ready to stop hiding and finally rearrange into something whole?